So far so good. Measurements here on the top side show you are successfully descending at a rate of 17 meters per minute. How does it feel down there?
Cold. Almost as cold as your gold fetishizing self, sir.
Well, that's unnecessarily rude. Do I have to remind you that the only reason you haven't been shipped off to the sentient frontline is because...
Because I have issues. I know. It's not like this is the 75th time you've reminded me about that.
That is completely intentional. Your mentality is a liability to my work here, and I will not stand anything going wrong, or any command not obeyed. Is that understood?
Die.
On a related note, let me remind you that I have the detonator for the bomb we have implanted into your chest, sitting on top of my instrument panel, and I would not mind being given a reason to activate it. It's quite ugly in appearance, and I'm tired of using it as paperweight. Now I ask again, am I understood?
Yes. Understood.
Good. Back to work, then, shall we? Currently reading you at the depth of 3,271 meters. How's your frame holding up?
Strong. I don't feel any bends or other discrepancies. The cold seems to have gone away. Nothing down here but blue, dark blue, and some more blue.
Sounds good. Please continue descending to the pre-approved depth of 3,400 meters. And let me know at once if you feel ill, at which point we'll just...
What was that?
Investigate immediately. Weapons are authorized.
Have you ever heard anything like that before?
Does it matter if I have? You'd still be scared. Can you see anything that suggests where or what that sound came from?
No, I can't. Scanner isn't picking up anything nearby. Whatever that was is either far down below, or this thing's busted. I'm, assuming you want me to continue descending?
You already know the answer to that.
I hate you so much. I still see nothing down here, but now my legs feel a little bit wet, so I think I might have accidentally wet myself.
Appropriate response. Do not be ashamed. Continue descending to the approved.
But I just saw something. I saw something. I don't know what the hell that was, but I just saw something.
Describe it, now.
Didn't look like a fish at all, or anything that belongs down here. Can I please come back up? I don't know what I'm up against here.
You have the tools for your survival. It's up to you to decide how or when you use them.
Oh, thanks for the pep talk. I really feel better about...
What was that? Say again your last, please. Operator, respond. Operator, say again your last, please. Operator.
That was the last recorded transmission between Dr. Canopus, formerly assigned to the Oceanic Research Edifice, also known as ORE, located on Uranus, and operator Eurydice, the previous test pilot of the Hydroid platform. Before you ask, no, Eurydice is not dead. At least, we think. Her body was recovered 1.25 minutes after that conversation took place, thanks to in-place safety measures and rescue personnel on standby. She was found to have her back ripped open, and her spinal column nearly torn to shreds, as well as chunks of flesh missing from her legs. As I speak, she is still currently in a medically induced coma, as medical personnel are in the process of fixing her up, so to speak. I'm told that recovery is not impossible, but extremely difficult due to the amount of tissue damage and the amount of blood lost. But I digress. I am Archimudian Perintol. Unfortunately, Archimudian Luther is not here today, as he has declined to do this particular entry due to... Never mind, I'll explain later. Regardless, today's subject of analysis is a distinct case. I should clarify on that. The Zoraman 10-0 incident saw a massive recovery effort unlike anything we've seen before, as you'd expect from the sudden appearance of a supposedly lost ship. Obviously there was a mandated investigation of the vessel and its contents, the results of which are not known to many. What is known, however, is that all passengers aboard the Zoraman 10-0, except for the children, were found to be deceased. Unfortunately, security footage on board the Zoraman has been seized by direct order of the Council of Seven, and to my knowledge has not been cleared for release. At the time, ongoing search and rescue efforts were thrown into disarray when the children displayed aptitude in manipulating pure void energy. The recovery process was not clean, as expected of children with emotional and/or psychological trauma caused by events prior to the Zoraman reappearing on our doorstep. The surviving children, now colloquially referred to as Tenno, responded to rescue personnel with fear and mistrust. A considerable number of personnel, including Tenno, were severely injured. All Tenno were eventually subdued, willing or otherwise. The vast majority of retrieved children were in satisfactory physical condition and were thus placed in isolated observation units prior to being properly transferred for study, under supervision of Archimedean Mogulis. Others were moved to immediately treat sustained wounds during the rescue operations of the Zoraman 10-0, ranging from blunt force trauma to lacerations. However, there were some exceptions. A group of 5 Tenno that had proved to be particularly uncooperative during the Zoraman 10-0 incident were rounded up and scattered to separate locations on an individual basis. Today's subject is one of those. Cephalon Stroth, please retrieve the respective operative dossier.
Understood. Retrieved operative file. Birth name unknown. Data has been expunged. Codename, Eridanus. Administrative remarks, forcibly isolated from acquaintance operators Gemini, Icarus, and Ouroboros due to involvement in the dismemberment of 9 retrieval personnel during the Zoraman 10-0 incident. All involved operators claim this to have been an accident despite refusing to comply with directions or commands from retrieval personnel. Note, none of the operators were able or willing to offer explanation or meaning behind the behavior and ramblings of the operator known as Ril, as his near-constant offhand comments about an unknown item or entity referred to as the man in the wall are enough to warrant psychological evaluation and possible treatment. Medical remarks, severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder, due to the Zoraman 10-0 incident. Currently undergoing transference somatic therapy as recommended by Archimedes. Destroyed a large amount of stock hallucinogens used to pacify acquaintance operator Gemini once she learned of their actual purpose. The withdrawal caused Gemini to suffer an extreme mental breakdown, losing control of void powers and inadvertently killing all 19 researchers assigned to Gemini. Security detail eventually succeeded in re-pacifying Gemini via injection of psychoactive and amnestic drugs. Gemini has since forgotten about the experience. Eridanus was severely reprimanded for her actions and recommended for reassignment on Uranus.
Thank you, Stroth. Now then, file number Uniform Delta Sierra TAC 020. Designation Hydroid. By now, I'm sure you have some idea of how a warframe is created. Sometimes there is a need for a certain type to be created due to circumstance, such as with Zaku. Other times, what was once a warframe was something else altogether, such as the Oblivion project being responsible for the creation of Limbo due to new discoveries. Archimedean Paravane has already made an entry regarding this, which is still currently available for any possible inquiries. Hydroid is one of those cases of created due to circumstance. Approximately 2 Earth years after the formation of the Corpus insurrection, An Orokin outpost located on Uranus detected a distress signal from a Pillar-class Corpus starship, which had seemingly made a crash landing out in the seas of Uranus. On-site security personnel, accompanied by an operator-piloted MESA, were the first to respond. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by a surprisingly young-looking merchant with a golden prosthetic left hand and a smile on his face. According to what was given during standard procedure post-event interview, the merchant quipped, "I am Parvos Granum, and I have no gold for you except for this." The merchant then made a gesture with his prosthetic hand. "Help me out and I might give you something worth your time. Bring your boss." Although the outpost commander was present at the time, the merchant demanded to see someone of exceeding authority. By request, a remote communication line was established between the merchant and a supposed representative of Executor Ballas. I do not know the exact details, but supposedly Parvos Granum's starship was shot down in a very poor assassination attempt, which ended up making an emergency landing on Uranus. Given the scenario, both parties managed to work out a deal. Parvos Granum promised to share his Spectre particle technology with the Orokin in exchange for immediate assistance in repairing his ship, as well as a custom-made wayframe as a bodyguard, reportedly saying, "I need insurance." Immediately after this deal was made, the Council of Seven ordered the construction of the Oceanic Research Edifice on Uranus. Publicly, the Council declared that the ORE was created for oceanography as well as hydroponics research and development. In reality, the ORE was being used to develop and test a brand new warframe prototype, one designed for amphibious and littoral warfare, deep-sea reconnaissance and counter-piracy. That may sound odd, but railjack crews during this time were notoriously poor at engaging and fending off boarding parties, and the Council was desperate for a solution. Hydroid was this prototype, with the reasoning supposedly being that having an amphibious-capable warframe would be necessary for possible future aquatic events, such as the deal with Parvos Granum on Uranus. After all, having an aquatic-type warframe would mean the Orokin would effectively extend their authority to any ocean in the galaxy, as being capable of manipulating water is a far more deadly feat than you think, and being in control of life's most essential thing basically makes you both feared and respected, almost like a god. Attribute number 1, Squall. As aforementioned, Hydroid possesses control over water and any surrounding moisture within the air. During his prototype phase, Hydroid was actually built as a modified version of the Frost Warframe, with the main difference being that the supercooling mechanisms within the Warframe chassis itself were completely scrapped and instead replaced with a multi-atmospheric water condenser. Otherwise, Hydroid possesses the same passive ability to draw in surrounding air and moisture, with the obvious exception of not supercooling it, unlike Frost. Instead, all water that Hydroid utilizes becomes slightly imbued with void energy, acquiring some form of semi-consciousness that does whatever Hydroid commands it to. Further study of this semi-consciousness is ongoing, but from what has been gathered, this effect applies only to water that Hydroid directly uses for attacks, or water that Hydroid willingly transfers this effect to. For instance, Hydroid may create a tentacle of void-infused water by slamming the ground before him, which automatically grabs and attacks any enemies within its vicinity. Since this tentacle is Completely composed of water with void properties, its attacks completely bypass all shield and armour defences. However, given the mediocre duration of this effect, usage is best advised for small-scale defences, such as on doors or hallways. Hydroid may also call forth a blistering torrent of water, with the severity increasing based on the amount of void infusion via charging. Hydroid's cast range for this torrent is infinite, since there is literally no place without an abundance of air and or moisture, perhaps with the exception of deep space. It should be noted that although the cast range is infinite, the effect range is rather constrained, so it's important to take some care in aiming. The corroding supplementary module is also available, which simply allows Hydroid to mix in nitric acid alongside the void-infused water, resulting in things becoming a little bit more melted than normal. Attribute number 2, Bombora. Due to the nature of oceanic operations, and even though Hydroid started as a modified version of Frost, it was still required to somehow waterproof the Warframe internals, as well as make them flexible enough to still function and retain its shape under potentially extreme amounts of pressure. As a result, the inside and outside of the Hydroid frame is covered in a combination of polyurethane, nylon and layers upon layers of fine microfibers which have been treated with ammonium stearate. This extensive chemical treatment allows Hydroid to remain fully operational and mobile, even in the most unforgiving oceanic environments possible. In cases where escape is necessary, Hydroid may quickly run towards or away from dangers by very briefly but rapidly infusing stored void-infused water with his own Warframe. This process results in Hydroid liquefying himself at such speed that it serves as its own propulsion, dragging and knocking away anything in its path. This, of course, does not last forever, as any longer could potentially risk permanent damage to the Warframe chassis due to excessive movement during liquidization. However, during this very brief period of simply being liquid, Hydroid is completely immune to all forms of damage. As an option, operators may also take the impunity supplementary module should the necessity for more supportive capabilities arise. This causes Hydroid to apply a protective, gelatinous layer on himself, and allies that come in contact with the liquefied Warframe, which immediately eliminates any negative effects on allies and lingers for a short time before inevitably evaporating. Attribute number 3, Sinkhole. Similar to before, Hydroid may also liquefy himself and gain complete damage invulnerability. But instead of simply rapidly transposing himself to water and using momentum to propel himself forward as a wave, Hydroid instead liquefies by covering himself completely in void-infused water, effectively becoming a very wet but highly volatile conduit of void energy. To the untrained eye, this may look like a sentient, bottomless puddle. In reality, Hydroid imbues so much water with raw void energy that it almost inadvertently results in Hydroid becoming a living, breathing pocket dimension of pure void energy, albeit filled with nothing but water. Like this implies, anything unlucky enough to fall into this puddle is highly susceptible to either die from drowning or immense water pressure within the pocket dimension. This does not come without cost, however. Due to the immense amount of energy required to properly maintain this state, Hydroid consumes more energy than normal based on how much he's moving, meaning that sometimes it's best just to run directly at enemies and then transform into water. Hydroid may also pull enemies into their watery grave if they are close enough to him to avoid moving himself, but this still consumes energy. Curative is also available as a supplementary module, which coats all allies in a modified version of the gelatin from the impunity module, with the main difference being that the curative gelatin has infested nanoparticles which serve to be absorbed by a Warframe as a form of healing factor. This allows to dramatically restore their health over time, but this has an energy drain on Hydroid while this occurs. Attribute number 4, Kraken. In a process which we are still researching today, Hydroid is capable of summoning some form of entity, presumably from the same pocket dimension he creates when liquefying himself. This entity bears a striking resemblance to the old Earth species Microcosmos marinus, and doesn't appear to possess any non-animalistic intelligence. The entity appears to be partly composed of the very same void-infused water that Hydroid produces, meaning that it's possible that it's a new form of aquatic life form. Due to its partial composition of void energy, it has the same effects as the tentacles which Hydroid may create himself, meaning that this summoned entity may attack any and all hostiles with absolutely no regard to shield or armor defenses. The summoned entity in question appears to flail its own appendages around, similar to the tentacles that Hydroid can create, with the number of appendages and afflicted area increasing, based on how much energy Hydroid consumed to summon this entity. Hydroid may also summon this entity while in his puddle form, to have the entity's appendages form around himself instead. The pilfering module can be taken as well, usage of which increases the amount of valuables which can be earned by slaying enemies caught by the summoned entity. How does it work? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Some say the entity is some form of cosmic spectre, capable of unknowingly bending the laws of reality into creating treasures to fall from slain enemies. Others say the entity becomes capable of striking enemies so hard they lose all their possessions. Whatever you want to believe, nobody knows how to properly explain it. It just works. My time is nearly over. Archimedean Luthar will return to his normal duties, I assure you. Now, you may be wondering why Luthar refused to document his scientific warframe. Not many people know this, but Luthar was not always an Archimedean. He was once one of our military commanders, and one of the finest we've ever had. But those days for him ended during the Zoruman 10-0 incident. The official reports for Operator Eurydice will tell you that she and other operators were responsible for cutting down several personnel, but that's a lie. That was Luthar. Luthar was among those who entered the Zoruman 10-0 to apprehend the passengers, but where the others saw vile and impure animals, he saw mere children and became horrified at what was happening. Drawing his Nakana, he attacked those who were attempting to harm the Tenno. Luthar maimed several of his own kin, allowing several Tenno to run away to safety, but Luthar ultimately collapsed due to sustained wounds. Luthar's unconscious body was later recovered, treated by medical personnel, and then thrown into a temporary holding cell. When he awoke in his cell, Luthar was greeted by a single curious Tenno crouching over him, Eurydice. Recognizing who he was, Eurydice smiled and said 2 simple words: "Thank you." How do I know all this? Well, I'm the one who made the report. I'm the one who watched and scrubbed the security footage on board the Zoruman 10-0. I'm the one who requested Archimedean Margulis to convince Executor Ballast not to terminate him for dissension. Luther is a good man, but I don't think he deserves to be terminated, not even for pointing his blade at his fellows. My assumption would be that Luther had been somewhat concerned with Eurydice's well-being since the events of the Zoraman 10-0, which would explain his reaction to learning that she had been selected as the Hydroid prototype's test pilot, and his dismay to hearing about Eurydice nearly being killed. Margulis is good at taking care of the Tenno, but she is by no means the only one. Some just do so without being watched by the Council of Seven. The rest? Now that's a story for perhaps another day. Terminating entry.